Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming on the call today. I'm well aware that today is the last day of the month, and I know the way the car business usually reacts to the last day of the month. It's panic and chaos and fear. And when I looked at this call initially, my first thought was, don't schedule it that day. And then it was the perfect day to schedule it, because the question and the main topic that I want to cover today is, do we historically manage, or are we progressively driven? And historical management is, every last day of the month is complete chaos, and then tomorrow could be the 32nd of the month, and the next day the 33rd of the month, depending on how you close. And we're one of the few businesses that really does things like that still to this day. Most people end the month on the day that the month ends. So one of the things that I wanted to cover today is, when we're looking at our month and we're looking at what we're going to plan, by tomorrow we should have a plan and a goal for the month. How do we set those goals? Typically we do it the way historically we've always done it. We look at last year this month. We look at last month. We kind of take a best educated guess from the gut. Well, I've run dealerships before, and I've given an assignment to sales managers, and it's an important assignment. Sit down with each salesperson. Probably the 24th or 25th of the month is about the latest I would recommend. Look at what their production has been. But the next time you do this, don't look at their production and then tell them what it is. Take a piece of paper, and I'm a computer guy, but I'm going to say this. Use a pencil and a graph piece of paper. Take the last 12 months of their production, or however long they've been with you, and graph it out. Also graph out what their average commission has been. Now, we can all do the math backwards to know what the average gross has been. You're going to see some patterns in these folks, and it will look to you probably like someone's heart rate just went completely insane when you start to graph out the number of units they do per month. But when you do this exercise, and it's really important, do it for every person. You're cheating them if you're not helping them. That's your job, to coach them, to train them. Put that stuff on one side of the paper, take a good hard look at it, and ask yourself this question as a manager. On those high months, who manages that person? And then the equally important question, on the low months, who manages that person? When you look at their grosses, at their commissions, are they kind of remarkably similar? And aren't the high gross guys always the high gross guys, and the low gross guys always the low gross guys? So the question that you ask yourself is, who manages them? Apparently, they're controlling the deal if they're consistently having a low gross average. And if they're having a consistently high gross average, they're probably managing a good portion of the deal. So it's taking a look in the mirror for some real hardcore truth as to what is my job. My job is to help this sales force succeed. Once you're done graphing and charting each of these folks, you turn that piece of paper over and you bring them in for one-on-ones. And for anybody not clear, and one-on-ones is not a group thing that we yell at them on Saturday morning. One-on-ones is when you sit down and you give them your undivided attention. No cell phones, no pagers, no page going off in the showroom. Undivided attention. It's important. They're important to you. So when I sit down with someone, before I set their goals, I ask them how they're doing. How many units a month do you average? You know how many salespeople I've had give me the wrong number? And by the way, it's usually never low. It's usually high. Well, I do about 12. You do 9.6. If they were doing 12, you'd sell another 30 cars a year. Sometimes they know that it's really not 12, and sometimes they think it's 12, which is even worse. What I do is I ask them what their average commission is, what they're on track to earn. Do they know what their average gross is? And then I turn the piece of paper over and I show them what it is. Then we start to goal set. And I've asked managers to do this type of an exercise before, and they'll come back to me. And then I ask them for their monthly goal, and they'll tell me it's 150 units. So when you set a goal with a salesman, there's two things you want to consider. One, obviously what is their goal? And two, you have to be honest of what their real capabilities are with you supporting them. If a guy really can do 12 cars a month, don't put 18, put 12. When you add all of those sheets up, I've had it add up to 175 or 80 cars, and yet the same sales manager who just did this exercise comes to me and says, my goal's 150. How'd you get that goal? Well, last year, I don't know what that has to do with today, but last year we did this, and last month we did that, and there's some incentive programs that will be coming out the 5th or 6th, and if they're good, I think that's no way to manage a business. Every great company in the world has one thing in common, every great company, and that's predictable business. When you go to Disney, you know exactly the experience you're going to get. We pay extra for FedEx because they deliver exactly on time. So when I sit down with a salesperson, how many times have you seen the guy that's your top guy? He does 15, 16, 20 cars a month, and he has suddenly a 7-car month. I always want to ask the manager after I'm done shaking him, who managed that guy last month? Well, at the end of the month, we go, oh, he had a bad month, and he struggled. Again, we're traditionally managing. We're not progressively managing. We're just historically managing. Well, he always does this. He always has that one bad month. No, we allow that to happen, and we allow it to happen to him. We owe it to our people to be more on top of it, and we owe it to them to look at what we're doing. Are we historically just recreating the same stuff over and over again? And the answer in almost every case I've ever seen is yes. So do we have a repeatable sales process that's easy to track, easy to make corrections in, or do we have 10 or 12 steps written on a board in a meeting room that, by the way, more than half of your people can't repeat in order? And those that can, I applaud them, and then I ask them the magical question, how many times in 100 does it go in that order? And then their face freezes. Well, it depends. See, by definition, we don't have a system. So what I've tried to do is make things as simple as possible. And in the car business, at least in my experience, I got into it almost 30 years ago. Everybody wanted to make it difficult and sort of mystical to me. And, you know, I always say the car business theme song is Frank Sinatra warming up singing, I did it my way. Everybody tries to have this, you know, magical phrase or the way I do things. The job of a manager is to have a system in place and to be able to work with people that everybody can do it. You hire a 12-car guy who sells 12 cars. Don't break your hand patting yourself on the back. You can't change talent, but you can change skills. And the amount of time that we tend to put in this industry into developing a better system or better skills for our people is really low. Now, a dealer's job is to provide strategic planning. That's really their job. They're the CEO. Most dealers I know do tactical planning. Now, if they get a building project, they do strategic planning because, well, let's face it, you have to, and it's the people you work with. Your bank wants to know what the long-range vision is. Your accountants need to know. The builder certainly needs to know, and we plan all that out. But we walk into our dealership every day, and we manage minute to minute, day to day. I know dealers that tell me that they spend all the time they spend in their dealership so they can keep control as to what's going on. One, you don't have control, and two, most people can walk into your dealership and tell you something you did not know about it. So we get so deep in the forest we can't see the trees. So as a dealer, you want to make sure that your dealer is able to do strategic planning. How can we do that? By taking care of the tactical planning. That's the short to mid-range planning. That's working with a sales staff and saying this sales staff is capable of 170 units. And then it becomes very much mathematical and logical from that point on. Did we have enough ups to do 170? What's our follow-up process? We had 300 ups. In theory, how many cars could you sell at 300 ups? 300, in theory. If we gave a demonstration ride for 250, how many cars realistically would be the most you could sell? Probably 250. If we only negotiate with 200 of the 300 people, the most cars we probably would sell is 200, in theory. We'll write about 60% of the cars that we negotiate with. So we'll write 120, and we'll deliver a little over 100. And then when we go back to the math, we say, well, that was about 1 out of 3. That wasn't bad. That's above average. And by the way, I don't know whoever established those averages. Your store's average is your store's average if you're counting every up. So, you know, it depends on your market, your franchise, et cetera. There are factors that go into that are truth. So, but if it's 1 out of 3, then you say, well, we did well. Well, my question isn't about the 1 out of 3. I have an accountant. I have a billing clerk. Heck, I have cleanup folks that can tell me if a car got delivered or not. What I worry about is the 2 out of 3 that didn't buy, and coming to the truth of why didn't they buy. That's more progressive management. Historical management is kind of like when you're in traffic. Anyone that drives faster than you is a maniac, and anyone that drives slower than you is an idiot. So it's pretty easy to figure out the buyers are the smart people, and the non-buyers, well, they're the idiots. So what we want to do is we want to analyze what happened. Well, I could have sold 300 in theory, but 50 people didn't demo. Why? Was it a product shortage? If you're a Toyota dealer and you don't have any forerunners, here's the reflex answer that we get from a manager or a salesperson. How come you didn't demo 50 people? Well, we're out of forerunners. How many of the ups exactly, precisely, were forerunners? My money says they don't know exactly. But they will give me an opinion. And that's what this business is really all about. It's about opinions. How come we're going to do this? Well, based on last year and last month. What about the potential of your team, the true potential? And within that true potential, what are you as a manager doing to help them get to that level? You know, the number one reason I get for everything in dealerships is, but we're too busy to do that. We're too busy to hire the right people. We're too busy to retain the right people. We're too busy to train the right people. We're just too busy. Well, I've done observations before, and it's not an assessment of a store. It's just an observation. I'll just go in and sit there and just observe them. And within about 2 hours, they've spent an hour on the Internet. And I say, you're too busy to do what? Well, they're too busy waiting for something to happen. And I'm not just trying to be negative about the management out there. I'm talking about this is historically the way that we've always managed. We throw on the lights, and we wait for things to happen. You can't work that way anymore and be a successful company or a growth-oriented company. You should be growing year over year. You know, math and logic dictates that our dealership should grow at a continuous and steady rate. If we're retaining, if we spend $50,000 in advertising, or go back to that 300 up store, if you spent $45,000 in advertising and you sold 100 cars, you'd say, okay, I spent $450 per unit sold. Now, the national average for new cars, that PNVR that's on everybody's statement, that's $500 to $680. It was $661 a year ago. NADA's numbers, not mine. Well, even if you spent $300 an hour, it's $300 per sold unit. For those 100 cars, you only spent $30,000. Do you know how much money you spent per up? As a manager, I need to know that. I spent $100 every time someone put a scratch on a worksheet. $100. The most costly piece of paper that you have in any dealership in the world is a worksheet. And yet, in most dealerships, I find them in desk drawers. They're flipped over with other notes written on the back of them. And that's in some cases even if they're filled out at all. And the people that go electronic, I love electronic. I've written software before. The sad truth is that electronic to a salesperson means more work. Then they begin to pick and choose who actually makes it, who makes the cut to actually get into the CRM. If I really don't think they're worth following up, I may not go to that step. And if you have a good system and your managers are really enforcing that and making sure that your people are putting every possible up in, well, congratulations, that's great. And then the next step still becomes the critical question. What as a manager are you doing to help them be more successful? That's your job. So if you're a tactical planner and you're planning for in the near future and down the road as a manager, you're probably doing a pretty good job. If you're a firefighting manager, like I was early on, like most people I know are, then you show up every day and the next crisis or the next opportunity you race towards. That's not only no way to run a business, it's no way to live. I know more people that haven't eaten a hot meal in a dealership in about 2 years because every time you order something, you never get a chance to eat it when it shows up. Thank God for microwaves. But I want to make sure that as you look at your business, you're asking yourself that really key critical question. And that is, are we historically managed or are we progressively driven? And I think that you'll find that more often than not, most of the things we do because that's the way we heard it, that's the way we saw it, but it doesn't have to be the way we see it moving forward. You've got to make changes within your business. You've got to be progressive. And if you don't know how to be progressive, then find another dealer or find someone that knows how to do it and get help from them. When you do that exercise, I think you're going to be really, really surprised when you graph out your salespeople. You're going to start to see things that you didn't realize about them. And if you manage them daily, this month coming up is an ideal month. There's 30 days in it. Forget how many selling days there are. It doesn't. That number is not as relevant as people make it in this industry. There's 30 days. The guy's got to do 10 cars. Take a photocopy of the 30-day calendar, and every third day, just write a number, 1 through 10. So on the 30th, he's got 10 cars delivered. If at any point in that month, that person, that individual, doesn't have 3 cars delivered by the 9th, tell them not to take it up that day until they meet with you so you can go through all their existing worksheets, all their past deals, so you can help them put together a deal. Take co-ownership in their goals, because when you add all their goals up, your months become just a miracle, and you'll start growing your business. And when I said earlier that logically we should be growing our businesses, if you spend $30,000 and you sell 100 cars and you got good at retention and you grew to 50% retention, in theory, wouldn't you sell 50 that came back anyway? And if if $30,000 got you 100 cars, in theory, wouldn't you sell close to 100 just based on that advertising? Now I know the math isn't that simple, but it's still logical. And I know more dealerships that have invested. Take your database. Take your entire database, all the names, add them up. Take that times the number of dollars per car sold and tell me what you have invested, what your dealer has invested in that database. The number will stop your heart. And yet we're still casting a line out there, not necessarily fishing where the fish are. So, as you bring these processes together and you start to be more process-driven and less historically managed, you're going to start to see much better results. And if nothing else, take a walk around your building today, and when you walk in, try and pretend like it's the first time you came in there. And if you're a manager, try and remember what it was like when you were first promoted. I sat with managers who will look me in the eye and say, now someone comes to the desk and they go, oh, here he comes again. What do you mean? He's going to tell me they're nice people, they're in a hurry, they need a payment. And you know what? 9 times in 10, the manager ends up right. That's exactly what the guy says. Well, if I know what you're going to say, then I should be able to give you one, I should be prepared for that, and 2, I should be able to give you much better direction. But it's Pavlov's dog. They know the guy's going to say it, so they get frustrated with him. That comes through to him. Then they give him half of the information he wants, or worse, they give him none, and they send him back to the customer, and they look at me like, that'll teach him a lesson. Oh, yeah, it sends a really nice message to the customer, too. See, you're not improving his skills. He doesn't know how to stay engaged with the customer, get all the information, bring the information to me so I can help him make a deal, and the best deal for the customer. So instead, I'll just react like I always have, and I'll tell them what's wrong. Again, last and not least here, do that exercise with those salespeople. Break them all down one at a time. Ask them what their goal is, and then ask the managers. The managers, ask yourselves. Write down a number that you think that person is capable of. And by the way, if you think that they're capable of 6 cars, then it's time to replace them. Because it's not just 6 cars. You're probably not measuring the number of ups they take to actually generate 6 sales. It's probably enough to be 12. But if you don't measure it, you don't know it. So anyway, I've taken up 20 minutes of time. That was the limit I had set on myself for this. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Mike, if you can help me with that.
No problem. The lines are completely open, gentlemen.
Well, it's either confusion or clarity. But again, I thank you all for taking your time on the last day of the month to sit in on this call. It was a far bigger attendance than what we expected, and I really do appreciate your time today. You all have a good day. Mike, you can take us out.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Anyone who has not made the call, you will receive the recording shortly.